let's talk about death. So, when we think of death, uh, we have to first acknowledge that it is the single most powerful um, concept across human history. Literally every civilization, literally every religion, um, has one thing in common. They have a way of dealing with death. So, death is basically the development of human history and civilization is all about going from an unknown state to the known state, right? So if you read up on the science of the physical world, there are so many things that seem so wild in terms of knowledge about how we can deduce the age of the universe and how we can conjecture about the origins of the earth and things like that, right? But we didn't at first we didn't know, so we speculated it. But over time, one scientific discovery was like, hey, what if we use this discovery to think about this? And then this had a cascading effect where unexpectedly and sometimes expectedly, some areas of knowing affect other areas of unknowing, and then it sheds a light so that it does know, and then so on and so forth, right? So, for example, genetics wasn't something that was figured out. So people used to think if daddy has a big muscle, then kid also has big muscle. But that wasn't true, right? So the monk in Germany, I think, he was doing growing peas, and he was like, "Whoa, what? Like when I cross pollinate, there seems to be an interesting statistical event going on here." And then turns out there was this thing called genes, and the genetics was responsible for how genes get passed down and such, right? So just like that, human history is all about knowing, going from a state of unknown to known. Why? Because the state of unknown is just really uncomfortable. Because there are so many unpredictable things, and they all usually uh, have something to do with death. So, when we can't predict what animals are gonna come at night, we can die at any time, right? So, in order to avoid that, we have fire, we have light. When we don't know when the next natural disaster is gonna hit, it makes life really precarious, right? Can we settle here or can't we? So because of that, we have measurements around tectonic plate activity and weather radar, so that we can monitor hurricanes and such, right? So just like this, we all want some kind of a comfort of knowing and predictability, because it gives us a boost in survivability. But the thing that we haven't solved ever is what happens after we die. We don't know, right? And that scares us. So we have to see, though, while when we focus on the individual death, it is scary, we have to see that death is a naturally occurring part of life. There is no life without death, because nothing lasts eternally. There is no death without life, because if something isn't born, there's nothing to kill, there's nothing to die, right? And it doesn't, and death is not just limited to humans and biology. So I remember discussing with you the three realms of existence, right? So in the human mind, there's a physical layer, the human experience. There's a physical layer of, something heavy striking my hand, and then aside from the hurt, it breaks my bones and then causes tissue to collapse. So that's a physical effect. And then the biology comes in. It hurts, and then white blood cells rush to heal the site. And then comes the mental aspect of like, and then this is a bad thing that's happening. I'm injured. Blah blah blah. Okay, so all the three layers, we're talking about death in terms of the biology, but physical matter also seems to die, right? So you have a rock, and then it gets broken down, and then the rock is no more. And then you have atom, and then it turns into something else, and then you have ice, and then it melts. Ice is no more. You have planets, and then planets form, and then planets dissolve, and then boom, planet dies. So that's the physical realm, biological realm we're talking about right now. But also inner experiences. Thought comes. Thought remains. Thought withers, and then thought dies. So in the Buddhist sense, there are 4 stages of life, right? Formation, and then existence, withering, and then death. And this applies to all levels. Okay, so while in one glance, while in one perspective, this seems like a lot of life and death, like a beginning end, beginning end, beginning end, beginning end. While in one perspective it looks like that, that's failing to look at the bigger picture of things. So what I mean by this is, we just discussed, planets form and then planets go away, right? But all the individual matter that composed the planet is still there, right? Rock breaks, turns into sand. But that sand, although it may also be disintegrated away, all the parts that used to form the rock is still there, right? Ice turns into water, so we might think ice is gone, but when you look at it at the wider lens, it's all water, right? Ice forms into water, into steam, and then water into ice. It's still water, just changing different forms. It recombines into something else, like sugar water. And then you boil the water, and then water goes away, and then sugar remains. So, but when it's together, it's sugar water, right? So just like this, in one level, it looks like it's such a sad thing. Something blooms, and then flower blooms, and then flower wilts away. Tide comes, and then the wave comes, and then the tide breaks, and then tide is death. So if death were actually inherently a sad thing, if death inherently was deserving of suffering, that means we have so many reasons to suffer. But we don't spend our lives thinking that that's necessarily a sad thing, right? Like, how much death are we surrounded by? Do you know how many ants in your neighborhood die? And, you know, like when a raindrop falls, right? Oh, rain has a life, and then it drops and it splats on the ground, and now it's dead. You could think of things that way, but then it's silly. That's wasting your emotional energy on things that shouldn't be that sad. Why? Because it's just a part of ordinary life, right? So the truth about death is, when you look at it in a zoomed in perspective, it's so sad, and it's so, it deserves so much grief and 5 stages of death, or everything up until into acceptance. But when you zoom out, all the matter that composes you already, right? All the skin cells, all the bones, all the neurons, all my blood, all the water that's in my body, all the electricity generated by my, body, it all comes from the food that I ate and the energy from the sun, right? So death of something else is what actually feeds my life. And if I have a protein in my body, that protein had to have come from somewhere, right? Or if it was generated in my body, the components of the protein, like the amino acids and such, it needed to come from somewhere else, right? I need to have ingested it. That's why when I don't eat for a prolonged amount of time, I'm gonna die because I cannot sustain my life. So we have to understand that in the interrelatedness, interbeing of our life, death is part of the spectrum. Death is not, in one way, when you look at it that way, death is the end of everything. But when you zoom out, it's not. So, for example, like, I'm not a Star Wars person, but Star Wars Episode 4, it's a standalone movie, right? But when the movie ends, did Star Wars really end? No, it has Episode 5 and it has Episode 6, right? So, just like this, when you walk out of the theater thinking, oh man, Star Wars is done with, there's no more Star Wars, that would be kind of silly, right? Because it has a prequel and a sequel. So, just like this, when you look at death at the multiple levels and see that death isn't this unilaterally sad thing, we get a more balanced view on death. But then why is it sad when we look at it from the zoom in angle, right? Why does it stress us out? So we tend to be afraid of making decisions because bad decisions may lead us to catastrophe, bad things. But what's the worst thing that can happen in terms of a bad decision? You can die, right? So if I took a whim of my life and I took a chance and I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna go backpacking somewhere. And then I take that chance and then I get mugged. And then I'm held at gunpoint. There's gonna be so much regret about, oh, I shouldn't have taken this. Well, why am I doing? And also, why did I come here? Why did I come to this part of the country? Why did I decide to hike at this time? What all and that is precisely like the worst kind of a thing that can happen, right? So, at the moment of your death, we will suffer. But is that our only recourse? Is that our only option? Are we really truly powerless over death? Can't we die in a happy way? So, in order to do that, we need to explore what about death feels so scary and suffering for me, because the answer is different for everyone due to their different karma, right? So when you sit in an airplane and the airplane is turbulent and then it goes, oh, what's the first thing that comes to mind? What's the thing that you are going to regret the most? When you think of your own death in these extreme scenarios, when you think that this is the last moment of your life, what gives arising to the suffering? And when we exhaust those reasons, and when we can get to looking at all of those reasons, pretty soon we are going to run out of reasons to suffer because of death. But while this is an individual venture, I will give you some guideline on how to explore this. There are some things you can think differently about, and there are some things you can do differently when it comes to your life. So, for example, you have a boss you don't like. Well, one thing you could do is quit. Another thing you could do is change your mind, right? Another thing you could do is try to work with the boss and try to change them. Like, what I'm saying is you have lots of options when it comes to how to deal with this, because there's a lot of variables, there's a lot of factors that can change. But with death, we have to really clearly identify what can we do and what can't we do. And if we keep on obsessing over things we can't do anything about, And we keep thinking, oh, but what if only I had that power to, if I could only control that thing I don't have control over. This is going to be a waste of your time. And that attachment is going to be responsible for a lot of your suffering. Because you're spending time thinking about what ifs when there are no what ifs, right? Of course, can it be meaningful? Can it give you more insight about yourself? Yes. But that kind of exploration can be done without the emotional attachment to, if only, oh man, if only I could have. That doesn't work. It's not going to be beneficial. So, when we think about the individual effect of death upon us, we need to be able to differentiate this fear, like what I'm fearing right now. Is there something I can do about it? Or is it more that I need to accept it as the parameter first and then do something about it, right? So, for example, you have a natural disaster. There's no point in thinking, oh man, if there wasn't this natural disaster, I wouldn't have. There's no point in thinking that because it's already happened. So, okay, so house is flooding. What do I have to do right now? We have to accept that this is happening right now. And we make the best course of action from there. So, that's the video on death. And let's discuss what this means for you in our upcoming session.